Hey, I'm just adjusting things. So if you see me go off, don't worry about it. I'm just adjusting here. All right. How's everybody? So let's jump onto here. So how's everybody doing? What's up? What's up? What's up? Hey, so I want to jump on and talk to you about two of Neville Goddard's quotes, but how they have to do with manifestation. But you know me, we got to go deep dive on this stuff. So I want to talk to you about two concepts and why they're so hard to get. Why are these two concepts so hard to fully, not just grasp, because this is not about grasping. If you think manifestation is about just knowledge, then you've got the wrong kind of manifestation, because manifestation isn't just about knowing. Manifestation is about being, but being is about experiencing, and experiencing is about being, right? So welcome, welcome, welcome. Okay, so again, what we're going to explore today is two Neville Goddard quotes, but we're going to deep dive into the psychology of it. Okay, we're going to try to get you to understand what's going on under the hood and how manifestation can help you, but how these concepts that Neville brings out, which aren't really, you know, in the mainstream per se. Because in the mainstream is, hey, I can have you manifest this person in 4 minutes, or hey, I can manifest body changes within a week. And not that you can't, people have. But what I'm trying to get away from is a consumer way of understanding manifestation, right? And there's nothing wrong with wanting, right? I mean, Neville says desire is the language of God. Okay, so that's totally cool. There's nothing wrong with wanting. There's nothing wrong with desiring, but wanting should never remain wanting, right? Wanting should always turn itself into desire. And why? Because desire comes with its own solution. Okay, so that means every problem that looks like a problem can always be fixed. That's really what Neville says when and what he means when he says desires, all desires come with their own solution. Okay, so that means there's no such thing as an unfixable problem. This is why it says with God or with the imagination, all things are possible. That means there's always a solution. So I'm always teaching my kids, for example, like, listen, changing your mindset. Hi, music. Changing your mindset, right, is changing your mindset from, oh, this is a problem, to nope, there are solutions, right? So everybody knows this quote from, oh, thank you for the hearts, by the way. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And so, a lot of people know this quote from Albert Einstein. Okay. And so he says, problems aren't solved at the level of the problem. They're basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but they're solved at the level of the solution. That means you can't think of your problem as being unsolvable. If you are, then you're still in the problem. You're experiencing the problem. Okay. And so Neville has this really cool quote that I actually heard today. And I'll find which actual lecture it's from, but I was listening to it on YouTube. And it was something that I myself hadn't come across yet. And um and he says, to really get this, to really understand this, to really get good at manifestation, you have to have an experiencing nature. Okay, so what does that mean, right? You have to have an experiencing nature. So there's a great scene. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Share below if you have. If you haven't, I would encourage you to watch this movie. It's with one of my favorite actors, and why I actually, one of the many reasons why I got into stand up was a good movie called Goodwill Hunting, and it's with Robin Williams and Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck actually wrote it, and all this kind of stuff. So there's a conversation in the movie. Okay. And so the conversation is between the Robin Williams character, who is a therapist, with Matt Damon's character, who's Will, and he just has loads of childhood trauma and all of this kind of stuff. But he has loads of knowledge, right? And he has loads of knowledge, super smart, MIT kind of like level smart. Okay. Thank you for all the hearts. I noticed that there's different colors. Why is there gold and red? Can somebody explain that to me? So, um, yeah. So hey, X, how you doing? How you doing? And so I'm just talking about the scene, by the way, from Goodwill Hunting, and we're trying to unpack what Neville means when he says we need to have an experiencing nature, okay? Because it's super, super important. Because a lot of people will come and they'll academically, and this is why I'm against just talking to you about stuff. And we're like, this is why I'm big on giving you tips, because tips are things that you can actually practically use, right? So it's like, hey, there's a nail over there, but I'm not going to give you the hammer. No, no, no. I want to give you the hammer so you can actually have the experience, right? Of, you know, um, what it means to fix something, what it means to board something together, what it means to create something, right? And so I want to encourage you to really, really deep dive this with me, and then we're going to actually talk about another one of his quotes, which I think is super important. Hey, Red Hood, how you doing? That's awesome, man. Oh, thank you, Red Hood. I really appreciate you guys showing up, man, and being here. Um, so again, we're talking about Neville's idea of having an experiencing nature, and that, by the way, has 4 or 5 different layers to it. You know me, everything that Neville writes is not just singular layered, right? It's like multi-layered. So we're going to deep dive into that. But to understand that, I want to come back to this. Yeah, and I mean, again, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for being awesome. Sorry for the background noise. Thank you for the hearts, awesome people. But again, I'm going to talk about the scene because I think that's going to get to the heart of what one level of what Neville means when he says experiencing nature, and that is from this scene from the Good Will Hunting, one of my favorite movies. I'll watch it again and again and again, right? And so again, back to what I was setting up. There's this conversation between the Robin Williams character, who's the therapist, Will, the Matt Damon character. I mean, the Will, who is like Matt Damon, right? And he's the traumatic kind of like young adult, and they're outside, and it's a day after, like, Will, who is very academically trained, meaning like he knows knowledge, he has knowledge, okay, so he knows stuff, he's super smart, like they even say he's like super wicked smart, right? And so Robin Williams goes on, because basically Will had teared his life apart, like by just looking at a painting, and it really, really caused him some trauma. The therapist, the Robin Williams character, right? And so he's talking to Will, and he says, Will, I could probably ask you a few things about the Sistine Chapel, right? But you could never tell me about the Sistine Chapel. You could tell me facts, of course. You could tell me about the year, who the painter was, why it was painted, but you've never ever experienced the Sistine Chapel. And then he goes on through all these examples, including sex. Like, he goes, you could probably tell me what sex is. You could tell me what the biology of having sex is, and the anatomy, and what's happening, and all the chemicals being released, and all this neurotransmitter stuff. But he goes, you've never actually been with a woman, right? And so this is one level that Neville is saying, like, you can't academically do this. You can't sit here and just talk about manifesting. Hence, again, why he says, listen, I'm not for vain repetition. There's nothing wrong with using, you know, affirmations. But and I mean, basically, his inner conversations, like as in watching and guiding and shaping your inner conversations, is a form of affirmations, right? I mean, he even quotes Richard Millikan, right? The guy who basically used affirmations for 16 hours. Okay, so obviously he wasn't against it. He's against a certain type of affirmation. Okay, and it's the kind that doesn't get you to experience. But then he also uses the next word, which is nature. Now, if you don't know much about Hebrew, like Hebrew thought, Hebrew writing, everything is metaphorical. If you go to the Bible or even the Torah or the Tanakh or the Gemara or, all of these other books, right? um, and you read everything literally, then you're not reading it correctly. Because these authors, the esoteric, the mystical authors, were not writing literally. There was always a level to them. There's always a level. Hence why when Jesus says, if you want to be a fisher of, like go and be fishers of men. But what he's saying is you got to fish for your desires, which means you got to go deep. And the psalmist says, as deep calls to deep, right? This is deep work. This is why I keep calling it deep work. Really, I should call it deep play, because this should be fun stuff, right? And so when this conversation is happening in the movie Good Will Hunting, he's saying, listen, there's a massive difference between you knowing how to manifest and you actually manifesting. But see, I like to remove the word manifest and put the word experience, because really that's what Neville is saying as well. Like, what you're creating is what you're experiencing. What you're experiencing is what you're creating. And it's the dance between the two. Okay. Are you with me? So let me say that again. What you're experiencing is what you're creating. What you're creating is what you're experiencing. There isn't a separation between those two experiences, right? And so you are always creating, you're always believing in something, you're always accepting something as true, you always have a strong notion, strong emotion behind an idea, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that is part of it, right? So that is what he means. But there's another level here, because nature means it's part of who you are, right? But that means you have to be taught to do this. Why? Because nature, somebody asked me yesterday, is there an argument between nature and nurture? I don't believe either of them exist. Like, I mean, I believe that you form your own nature and that natures can be changed. In fact, I would love to say that's my concept. No, science actually argues for that. So as much as we read and hear science as that's nature, no, even science itself is changing its own knowledge about what it means to be a human, right? Always. We're always changing based on research, and the research is changing because our knowledge is changing, right? And so that's yet another example of what Neville's talking about here. What is an experiencing nature? This is going to be hard for many people with what I'm about to say. Experiencing nature means you have to always be curious, right? You can't ever be this is who I am and that's it, right? This is why I don't agree with American marketing, most of American culture, right? And I'm saying that as somebody who grew up in America, right, and who's taught in American universities, and and who's written books in America, who's right spoken on stages in America. Like I'm saying that as somebody who's very culturally aware that I'm part of this. But the problem is that when you live in a country, a lot of times, especially if the country is like hyper focused around nationalism or hyper focused on we're the best country in the world, and you take that identity on, you learn not to be closed-minded. But then if you grow up with parents who either traumatized you, you then begin to think of information outside of what you know as a possible threat. So if you know, for example, hey, parents abuse their kids, to think that parents could love their children is going to be foreign to you, right? Or if you grew up and your parents were always fighting over money, then your nature is to think that money brings fighting. So do you understand why whenever like Neville says this is an experiencing nature, he's really challenging us to be aware of what nature is that we've accepted about ourselves. Because nature can be changed, beliefs can be changed, right? And so you have to be in an ongoing mental posture, right? Of of um right of um what if, but not what if negative. What if positive? What if I could be the next president? What if I could have a car that always works? What if, right? So, and the reason being, and I know I've shared this before, and some of you may have heard this, right? Is that you end up, your brain is already on protection mode because it bases most of its understanding of what to protect on your past experiences of yourself. So when he says experiencing nature, that means you have to be actively changing your nature, not tomorrow, not 10 years from now, for the rest of your life. You have to be in a state of nature change, right? And so that's why you have to be curious. And so this is going to sound really simple, but curiosity can actually cost you courage. Meaning if you don't become curious, you're never going to be courageous. And so when Neville says that you need an experiencing nature, you have to be always modifying, always changing, always challenging, always overcoming, right? And let me say this though, okay? Let me say this. And yeah, actually, you know what? I'm gonna break that down, X. Yeah, thank you so much. And part of what this means is not that. Now, Neville had this belief about, and I know where he got it. He got it from scripture about the world of affliction, right? Does that mean that we're not gonna like that we can use manifestation to never ever have problems, right? Because sometimes you'll meet people who are like, I feel like I've just had a blessed life my whole life, right? And every to each their own. Like this is where I don't always necessarily agree with Neville. Like I don't see the world as a world of affliction, right? If everything's about learning, which is another thing that he says, why call everything pain? Why call everything frustration? Why call everything loss? Why call everything right? Like as if you're going to always be experiencing something bad. You're not. You know what I mean? And so you have to also understand that like people like Neville, doesn't matter. Florence Scovel Shinn, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who these people are. They themselves were still framed by their own experiences, right? And so so you have to take some of his theories with a grain of salt. Now, what he did do really well is explain how to use the law. Okay. And I think to me, and I know I'm biased, so I get it, and I'm not saying anybody else is wrong. I think he actually expressed it in such a way where I think it made really, really good sense to people. And so, when he's talking about these concepts and people read them as surface level concepts, I think they cheat themselves So again, experiencing nature is on the first level. Hey, like, X was saying, right? Just do it, right? You have to just do this. But the third level is that's how you manifest. You don't want to talk about being rich. You don't want to talk about feeling good. You don't want to talk about being healthy. You want to be healthy. You want to be in love. You want to be fearless. And in fact, I always talk with one of my manifesting buddies, and at the fundamental heart of what this is about is you being fearless. Oh, okay. So I don't have money right now. Oh yeah, but guess what? I'm gonna be fearless enough. That's brazen impudence. You really want to understand what brazen impudence is? Like that term, which is a technique from Neville, right? It really does mean fearless. Like you are just so damn fearless, where it's like, oh, I don't have money. Yeah, but I'm fearlessly a billionaire right now. I'm fearlessly have a healthy body. I fearlessly have everything that I want. I fearlessly live in ecstatic joy, whatever that is, right? And the other quote that I wanted to jump into, anyways, was this one that actually has tied in with that. And he says this, which I think is important to hear, because most people in manifestation circles do not have these two things. And I know that sounds like a judgment, and it's more of an observation than it is making a judgment call. I'm not saying that there aren't people out there that have tackled this, right? But he and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, listen, he goes, really at the heartbeat of this is relaxation and happy and being happy, right? And yet those are the two things that I don't see, right? And I mean, I'm spending time on Reddit, I'm spending time in WhatsApp groups, I'm spending time in Facebook groups, and the one thing I don't see is that people are not relaxed, they are not happy, they are stressed, right? um you know Yes, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a great metaphor, X. Like, you have to be fearless. Now, I'm going to come back to all this, by the way, because I'm going to explain why it's so hard to do that. But I wanted to try a little something different today, where we deep dive into his context first, right, and then go back into the whys, and then how to overcome this stuff. But you know, when Neville says this, he says, "Listen," he goes, "So rather than waiting to feel relaxed, rather than waiting to be happy, go and be that." That's really what he was trying to get at. So then why is it that so many people are saying, why is this SP not here? Right? Because that's not a relaxed question. A relaxed question is, I already have it. And that's what he says in this quote, right? He says, essentially, if you already had everything, what are the emotions that you'd have? You'd be relaxed and you'd be happy. So get out ahead of it, which means you feel it before it shows up, right? And so when you're sitting there and you're looking at a bill that you can't pay, and everything in you says don't relax, that all that's doing, by the way, all that's doing is telling you that you have a story that says you shouldn't be relaxed. Have you ever felt guilty for being relaxed? Like, like, have you ever felt guilty for being happy? Or have you ever felt guilty in the presence of others, and you're like, oh, they're bummed, so I can't be happy, right? So we have this false humility in our culture, right? We have these false ideas that somehow we shouldn't feel happy, we shouldn't feel relaxed, right? So there's this great book, and don't worry, it's going to tie in with all of this, and it's by Gabor Mate. I don't know if I've said his name right, but basically he's a psychologist. He was diagnosed with ADHD many years ago, but basically he argues that culture is at fault for many of what we call neurodiverse issues, right? And so, like, for example, as somebody who has ADHD, right, he's saying that label is just such a blanket generalized label, right, that we just end up, okay, making up things that we forget to see. Oh, this may not be a medical issue at all, it's a cultural issue. So then when you live in a culture that says, hey, you should have 5 different things on, you should have a phone, you should have an iPad on, you should be watching stuff, that causes what we call things like ADHD. Now, whether you agree with that or not, and as somebody who has ADHD, right, um, you know, I'm not offended by that. I'm not offended by that as a possibility, because as somebody who studies culture for a living, right? I get paid to actually study human culture, right, as a behavioral scientist. One thing that I've noticed, and you've heard me say, is that a lot of our ideas come from the outside. So when we're sitting here and we're trying to relax, and then you actually relax for a day or two, and you feel like, wow, this is amazing. And this is what Neville's getting at as well, right? Is when you feel relaxed and you feel guilty about being relaxed, that's a belief. Like you've learned to believe that you should not be relaxed because the culture says you should not be relaxed. Now, when I say culture, I'm talking about your childhood as well. Like the way your parents parented you, the way your social groups, your friend groups might have trained you, whatever it is to feel accepted. So then we actually, this is warped, by the way. This is really warped. We literally, right? We actually get praise for burnout especially in American culture, right? Yes, there are other cultures and there are non-Western cultures that actually work and worship, like Dubai, but that's very Westernized, right? So the reason why I'm bringing this up though is because I live in a sector of the world where we have worshipped the idea of hustle culture. Okay. So it's like, oh, you have 6 hours left of your day after working a 12-hour day. Just cover those with following your dreams, right? And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, right? But the problem is, and the issue is that you're now worshiping the idea of burnout because it's the cultural value of how to be. Okay. And so this is the same thing with relaxation and happiness. Like, why is it so hard for us to just be relaxed and happy? Because we live in a culture, and this is what Paul says, do not be conformed, right? Do not be conformed. Don't follow the pattern of thinking. That's really what he's saying. Because conforming isn't just what you're doing on the outside, it's what you're doing here, right? Because we're always imagining, okay? And so fundamentally, what you are creating, what you are experiencing is you not being yourself, right? And so you not being yourself, and there's a great definition that Jim Carrey, yes, that Jim Carrey, gives about depression. Okay. And he says, depression is giving you the deep rest of playing the character that society tries to force upon you that you don't want to play anymore. Right. And so, why are there so many people that are depressed? Because they feel like I can't and I'm not able to and I shouldn't be playing this character role anymore, right? And so and the reason why I wanted to bring this up today is because nobody's talking about this in manifestation circles. They're just saying believe more, persist. All 3D and circumstances don't matter. I don't like that. I don't like bumper sticker way of understanding. So do the ancient Jews. They absolutely hated stereotypes. Why? Because everybody's different. Yes, we are all divine, we're all one, but the way in which we all experience that in the human body and human experience is extremely different. Not wrong, not right, not evil, not good, just different, right? And so, oh, thank you, music. And so, I really, really want you guys to hear that is that, like, manifestation should be about happiness. Manifestation should be about relaxation. And if you're not, you need to ask, what have I learned? What have I been taught? What have I accepted as true about myself or about others, right? That have actually created a mold that I no longer want to live in, right? And so, again, experiencing nature means I'm experiencing all the time. You're never not experiencing something. Now, check that out, because I would love for you to disprove that. I don't think you're going to ever be able to. You're always experiencing something, but that experience, and this is the fourth part of the experiencing nature quote from Neville. And I do see your question as well and your comment as well. And so your nature is derived from something. Okay, so Neville and the ancient authors talked about how a tree can only bear its own fruit, meaning if you plant an apple tree, you're going to get an apple tree. So guess what? If you plant doubt, you're only going to get a tree or a way of seeing things through the lens of doubt. So that means that's going to be your experiencing nature. Okay? So again, nature is something you create. It's not like necessarily who you are all the time. Okay? That does mean that we need to be on it all the time. That does not mean that we need to be exhausted, because as somebody who's now been able to get to a point where I can say comfortably to you and truthfully that I'm getting more comfortable with the idea of being able to modify my thoughts in the moment, right? And it is not easy. It has taken time. Okay. I need you to hear that as well. All right. It doesn't happen overnight, but I'm getting better and better and better because I can do it in the moment because I'm watching my thoughts. That is the nature that you want. That's not my nature. So don't take this as, oh, he's a guru. No, I don't like guru, enlightenment, all that stuff, right? Enlightenment is something that you do in the moment. Enlighten, right? You turn on the light for a minute, okay? And so I think enlightenment in terms of what enlightenment is, or like Buddhist enlightenment or something like that, right? Is that you have these moments, right? So even like, but it's an ongoing set of moments. It isn't a moment and then you're it. Like I follow a Reddit group called Enlightenment, and people are like, I'm enlightened, and then everybody's like, no, you're not. Just go eat, right? And so, and I actually kind of like that because it puts the pressure off of, hey, I'm learning, I'm growing. You never arrive, right? And again, the Hebrew idea of perfection is that you never arrive. So when it says be perfect as I am perfect, it's saying grow as I grow, learn as I learn. That's literally what that verse is saying. But it's also telling you I am being growth. So let me say it another way. Be or embody growth as the I am embodies your growth. So, meaning whatever you put after I am is going to either help you embody growth and learning and curiosity and all those things that we've been talking about. And I'm going to talk to you about this really cool, and I think I've shared this before, maybe not, but the Hebrew idea of hope, which is a really, really great idea. And you need to listen to Neville's lecture on faith, hope, and love, which I listened to today. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Let me go back to these questions and stuff, and so see what X says as well. So X says, I mean, I enjoy working, hence I will move to the US in a couple of years. Well, that is one of the reasons. I think it's also partially because I enjoy taking risks in German culture. It's against it. Interesting, X. So that's really cool. So again, yeah, and you're making that work, right? So you're living out of the experiencing nature of wanting to experience what it means to be in a different culture. Now, I would also encourage you to actually go ahead and do that here, like meaning where you are. Do it now. Don't wait 2 years. So like Neville says that, right? So he's like, hey, like somebody asked him, like, what if I have to wait for my house to be made or painted for 6 months? No, no, no. You live in that house every single day as if it's already painted, or you live in that house as if it's already the 6 month mark is already up, right? And it doesn't matter how long you wait, you live in it every day in the state of already having the house. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Like that's super, super cool though. Um, so how do you turn that around? I've been feeling guilty for effortlessly getting anything I want lately without taking any physical. Dude, that's amazing. Like, and I think X like asked you a really good question. Like, it feels like I need to be doing more. So again, that's a product. And again, I know I slam America a lot, but I mean, I'm not into any nation, by the way. I don't think there's anything like, I mean, Paul says, no nations, no races, no, right, all of this kind of stuff. So I'm not into pro nationalism or whatever it is, right? I'm grateful for where I'm at, sure. But at the same time, I'm not like one country is better than another. Um, and so in that sense, I'm more of like an anarchist, right? I'm just against mediation. I don't need a country to tell me what to think. I don't need a president to tell me what to think. I don't need a pastor to tell me what to think. I don't need anybody, right? And I don't mean that in some jerky way, because you need to learn, and sometimes you have to have conversations to learn, right? So, you know, but Raheem, for you, that might be that you have grown up with this idea of effort, right? Like you need to earn yourself. Like whatever you get, or you need to earn validation, or you need to earn. By the way, that's a very American concept, not just a very parental one. But guess what? Where do you live will also tell you what you value. So if you live in a country that says you need to earn your way, guess how your parents are going to be? You need to earn your way. Guess how your pastors are going to be? You need to earn your salvation. Guess how your boss is going to be? You need to earn your raise, right? And so, do you see where I'm getting at with this? So, this is something that you really, really want to be aware of is like not just, and this is why, and I think Raheem, you talked about this the other day about my video on the macro beliefs and then the micro beliefs, right? You need to be aware of those all of the time because the macro is you. Again, just throw out an example if you're new to my stuff, right? The micro belief is, hey, I believe I get money all the time. right? But then the macro doesn't match up with that, and you start saying, "Oh yeah, but the world is in a monetary crisis," or like, for example, because you watch the news or whatever it is, right? Or all of this kind of stuff, right? And so, um, so then what's going to happen is you might manifest that money, but then it's going to be through the lens of the macro. So then if you're like, money is really easy for me to get, but to actually get that money, everybody has to work hard. So guess what? Money's going to be easy for you to get, but you're going to have to work hard to get it. So always watch those, right? Always be aware of those day in and day out. And this, by the way, the macro, here's the thing. We all know, by the way, we all know that um, when it comes to beliefs, okay, that we need to be constantly shaping them. We need to be constantly guiding them. Okay. But when you are guiding them, you can, the one thing that Neville says that we don't get is to know the how. Okay. But here's a really cool technique that I've discovered for myself. Okay. And this is something that I've actually discovered and I've tried and tested out. You may not always know how something's going to happen or how it's going to unfold. Here's a cool little technique for you. But you can control the what of the how. Okay. So what that means is, like, for example, the macro beliefs, which tend to be your bridge of incidents. Okay. So which tend to be your bridge of incidents. All right. So that means your generic beliefs about life tend to be your bridge of incidents. So you can control the what it looks like. Let me give you an example. It's actually kind of a messed up example. It's a true, really happened to somebody. I'm not going to give you the background information. It is somebody that you probably watch YouTube videos for. Me and him are really good friends, all this kind of stuff. But he shared with me this really interesting story. And it was about manifestation. And this is an example of somebody not being aware of their macro. Okay. Now here's the thing. I'm not judging. I'm showing. I'm showing you how this works. Okay. So this person wanted to spend time with their son, right? And they're separated, like husband and wife separated, all this kind of stuff, or whatever, girlfriend, boyfriend. I don't even know whether they were married or not. But essentially, he wanted to spend time with his son, right? And that was like the Sunday, and I think it was like he wanted to get tickets to go to the zoo. Like for some reason, he had to reserve tickets. I think it might have been during COVID or something. I'm not really sure, but like basically, he had to reserve these tickets. Okay, and what happened was though is that day came and gone, so he wasn't able to get tickets. They were sold out. So he sat the whole week revising it. Okay, so I think he gets a call that Thursday of the following week, or the Friday. The zoo says, "Hey, cool thing. Actually, we actually have these extra tickets, and you and your son can come on Sunday." So he was like, "Yes, the revision works." Blah 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 blah. So excited. So he gets there and he's spending time with his son, and he has a conversation with one of the ticket people. And they tell him, like, weird circumstance that happened was, hey, there was a couple that had actually booked, you know, there was a couple, right, that ended up booking those tickets, and they both ended up dying, right? So you ended up getting the tickets. Okay, so here's the thing. I am not going to ever blame that guy at all. You never blame. Like Neville says, you never blame, you never sit in regret. But to figure the law out, you can say, okay, he might have had a macro belief that to get what you want, you have to give up something else, right? Or that to get what you want, loss is inevitable, or whatever it is. Did he kill those people? Not at all. He has no power to do that. And that's where I agree with Neville. Death is something that we don't get to touch. Okay. And so, and that's never. That's never. I don't care how coincidental it looks or whatever happened. No, you just don't, right? And so, unless you grab a gun and try to shoot somebody, then that's different, right? But in terms of somebody dying naturally or whatever the event is, none of us get that, right? And so, um, you know, um, and again, what you end up with though is that you end up with the macro, which is your bridge of incidents, usually, right? And then your micro is you experiencing through the nature that you've accepted as true. Okay. And so, um, I'm debating whether I teach you this technique, and I usually only teach it in my group, my coaching group. Which, by the way, please consider joining the actual coaching group. Would love to have you all there. This is such a cool little community that keeps showing up. And if you're thinking about it and you just want to kind of feel around, then join the free Discord. There's a link in my bio. But if you have more questions, then hit me up on the email as well. So again, right. And so, yeah, changing. Yeah. Right. So, but again, change, growth, curiosity are extremely important. Okay. So yes, and I'm going to get to that, by the way. Um, I'm going to get to that in a minute, actually. So again, any techniques for changing micro and macro. And, you and I, Raheem, have actually had that conversation, right? I think, and, we kind of dealt with it and not dealt with it, but we brought it up in our last conversation on, Google Meets. So, but I do want to actually go back to your question because I think it'd be super helpful. And so I'm just thinking through what I want to focus on here. But again, remember, you can change your bridge of incidents. I believe that. What that means is you can have a hand in guiding the journey, because that's what bridge of incidents means, to getting your desire. You can't know necessarily always the how. That means all the little details. Now, here's something that you're not going to hear in any manifestation group, right? I mean, there's one guy I think I've heard him say something like this, and this is something that's going to be hard to hear. Okay. Um, so Neville says that he himself, he said, all of my failures would condemn me if I sat here and told you that I was able to keep my attention to get everything that I wanted. So let me say it this way, and this is going to be a gut punch for some people, I think, and it's not meant to be. But to me, I think this is why reframing is super important. Um, and what I gave you yesterday as the technique to call everything good is another way of saying that is that you're not always going to manifest what you want. That does not mean you can't manifest what you want, or that doesn't mean that if you try that you're not going to get it. That doesn't mean any of that. What he's trying to say is that the only currency that you need to be aware of that you have is attention. It isn't money, it isn't fame. It isn't love. It isn't acceptance, right? The only currency that you have in this world, and that's why he says this, right? And he says, I mean it literally, imagination is the only reality. What are you doing, though? You're building out a world through what? Your attention. Your attention animates your reality. And I love that picture because he even says, and by the way, here's another technique from Neville's mouth. And I actually love it. So you can imagine that every time you go into your scenes, it's like a wax museum. And so every single time, though, that you look at somebody, look at an object, look at a thing in your imagination, and you give it an emotion behind it, and you give it the words to say, you're animating it. You're interacting with it. It's real, right? And so, that's one thing that you can do in terms of your scenes is that you look at the person and they look at you, and the words that you're giving them are literally mouth back at you. Not mouth do not do like a lip sync thing. Fully hear their voice, right? Like actually have them say it to the point of actually being convinced, right? But again, just because we don't always get what we want doesn't mean that we can't get it. I know that sounds contradictory because people will hear that and they'll say, well, wait a minute. Does that mean that manifestation doesn't work? No, because manifestation is always working, right? It's always based on our attention. And so what that means is we got to get good at attention, right? So that's our currency. You can't think that anything else exists out here that hasn't started or was initially imagined, right? And again, when you fill in the word like the word imagine, because I think that's too nebulous as well sometimes, you could fill it in with the word meaning, perception, interpretation, feeling as conviction, whatever you're convicted. So let's just say this: emotional conviction is your reality. So when Neville says imagination is your reality, just fill that in. Emotional conviction is my reality, right? Or meaning is my reality. Interpretation is my reality. Perception is my reality. And when I took my Harvard course, this is a really, really cool thing. And I will come back to these questions and respond as well. Is what you're so again, so when I was taking my Harvard neuroscience course, right? So we were talking about light, and we were talking about photons. We were talking about how the eyes perceive, and so on and so forth. Okay, so everything you see here has a photonic quality. Okay. Now, this is trippy. Okay. This is very trippy. And you're going to try to disagree with this because your brain's going to want to disagree with this. Most of what you're seeing around you is just light. Everything else is agreed upon interpretation. Okay. So in philosophy, that's called intersubjective. But in neuroscience, this is just light. We're experiencing light. Everything else is interpretation, right? And so this is super interesting and it's super key for you to realize that in our conversation today, right? Because this goes back to why am I not relaxed? Why am I not happy? Well, then guess what you're doing? You're interpreting light. You're giving a density to it that doesn't serve you, right? And so you are giving a meaning to it that doesn't get you what you want, right? And your attention is the only currency that buys you the experience and builds out the experiencing nature that Neville says that we need to have, right? And so you're the only one that can do that. I can't do that for you. I could help you, and this is what I'm here for. So why I'm coaching. So I'm offering you coaching. This is why I'm doing this every day because I believe in what I'm doing, right? But I also believe in what you are capable of doing, right? And I know I say that a lot because I really, really want you to know that there are other people who aren't out just to get money. Yes, I enjoy what I do. I enjoy getting paid doing what I do, but I also enjoy this, right? And that's really what fundamentally Neville is saying. If you really want to get out ahead of your imagination, enjoy. Like literally find the littlest things that get you that give you joy, right? So I'll give you an example. It's a personal example, right? Because a lot of people love personal examples. So my son and daughter yesterday, uh, who are amazing, um, they got into a disagreement yesterday. Okay, and I stopped them and I was like, okay, you guys need to do something for me. And that is to basically embody the character. And I forgot her name. I called her Mrs. Chaos. You know how they have the Mr. Men books, like the Mr. Men and then the Mrs. all this kind of stuff. There's one with squiggly arms. And I was like, you're gonna have to embody that. I need you to show me that right now. Right. And so, one chose to, one chose not to. Right. And so the one that chose to, though, their attitude changed immediately, like immediately. Okay. And remember, your attitude, and this is what my newest Reddit article was on, your attitude is also a form of currency, right? And it works with your attention. And so you have to realize that it's okay to do things in this body to get you out of a state. Okay. There's nothing wrong. It's not like, no, it's only only meditation, only manifestation, and I can only use Neville's techniques to do this. Right? Mr. Tickle. There you go. Right? Very good. Thank you. Um, and so, right, and so you find ways because if Neville's right and he says all of life is building out and experiencing nature, right? Well, then you want to find ways every single day to get you out of your own head. Okay, so there's a life coachy person, Mel Robbins, and she has this technique. You probably do it. You don't even need her to do it, but it's 5 4 3 2 1 that gets you out of your head, right? So as a psychologist, I encourage people to go through what's referred to as exposure therapy. This is actually a technique for today, right? Exposure therapy is quick and it gets you out of your head. Okay. Now, remember, you're never out of your head, right? Um, yeah, no, exactly. That's exactly it. But, for kids, they're still learning, right? And they're going to have their own techniques as well. And I'm super open minded about that. I'm super laid back in terms of that. But while they're learning, you can also teach them ones. And there's loads, like you said, X, right? The technique doesn't matter. Don't rely on the technique, but find something that gets you out of your head and then immediately into the new state. Okay. That's how you learn how to change in a twinkling of an eye. People are blown away that Neville said that. One, it's from the Bible, but two, that he's like, you can change that quick. You can. And I can show you right now. Right. So I'm going to show you right now in the moment how you could do this. Okay. So I want you, and you don't have to do this, but if you want to, think of something that really freaks the crap out of you. And I don't care. And it doesn't have to be anything big. Like you don't even think about money. Think about something that has not too much of a big bearing. Maybe like watching a horror film or like going like clowns or like whatever it is for you. Just think about it. Right. Start feeling it. Start feeling it. Start feeling it. Start feeling it. Okay. And then now what I want you to do, let's say it's a clown, because people freak out about clowns. I don't, but right. And then start squeaking the voice, right? Start making this because people probably think of the it clown like, "Hi, Georgie," right? And then now do it like squeak a voice. "Hi, Georgie. Hi, Georgie." Like really high, high as you can, high as you can, high as you can, right? You know what I mean? Um, and so what? And then black and white your picture of the clown and push it away. Okay, guess what? You've now down regulated your fear center. Okay, and you've done that within what? 12 seconds? Right? And Neville says by then, if you get good at this, you should be able to impress the subconscious in 10 to 12 seconds. His words, not mine. Right? And that means in 10 to 12 seconds, you should be able to manifest or at least know that something's on its way. Right? And yes, I do. Yeah, for sure, X. I'm actually a big advocate of parents teaching their kids the law every single day. Right? Every single day. And so, like for them, for example, they'll have something on their wall, and then they'll be like, "Okay, first thing when you get up is meditate, and then after meditation, write three things you're grateful for, and then after that, write three things you want to manifest today, right?" And so that's what they do every day, right? And so even when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, "Hey, so what are you planning to manifest today?" Right? Because this is fundamentally, and one of them, she's not as keen, the other one is, but I'm going to continue doing it, not to force, but I don't force it down their throat. That's one thing I don't agree with. That would be like Christian side, like trying to say you need to be saved or whatever it is, right? You just don't do that. You know what I mean? Um, and so again, yeah, what state are you in? That's a great way of understanding this. But remember, a state is what? A state is not one thing. A state is three things always interacting with each other. This is how you also build a self concept and break a self concept. This is how you build a state and break a state, right? Which is understanding that it's three things, not one thing. Okay. And that is beliefs, emotions, and memories. And I've talked about this before as well, right? And I'm doing a workshop on this in my Discord group pretty soon. It's only $50. You get a free ebook afterwards, all this kind of stuff, right? And I'm giving you just a surface level. And so it's beliefs, it's emotions, and memories. You change all three of those. You change one of those, that's why things don't work out, right? So you have to change all three of those because that's how your brain is understanding who you are, and a state is who you are, right? It's a body of beliefs that create a perceptive lens, or what Neville says hardens into fact. And hardens into fact just means a perceptive lens, a way of seeing the world, a way of interpreting, a way of living by it, right? So did you hear all that though? It's a way of living by it. It's back to the original quote. It's an experiencing nature. So the more that you don't actively and aren't editing your own beliefs and you let the world do it for you, you're just going to be whatever the world wants you to be, right? Hence why there's so much people pleasing. Okay. But let me go back to these questions, right? So I think, let me go back to Raheem as well. Let me go see here. And then thank you, X, for all these awesome comments. Um, yeah, so you said your family is very, okay, but on earning your success. So that makes sense, right? So yeah, so you have to create scenes where you just get success easily and your family celebrating you, even if you don't ever interact with them again, right? But that you're using that scene because the belief obviously came from a memory with them, right? Or you can create a whole different family altogether that's always bigging you up, right? It doesn't matter in one sense what the scene is. It's that you feel it real. It's that you're convinced and convicted and that you accept it as the only deep truth possible, right? And so you continue down that path, right? Until you know I'm that person. But you also act it. This is the fifth that I didn't talk about this. You're experiencing everything now, right? That's your nature. You want to do a nature audit, do it every day. And all these little techniques, you make it your own because a lot of people come on these and they feel so overwhelmed because I'm giving you so many techniques. No, no, no. I'm giving you so many techniques. One, because the techniques don't matter, but then two, to give you just a collection of things that you can draw upon, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, right? And most of what I'm sharing with you has been proven by science, right? So this isn't stuff that's like made up, right? And so, you know, we have to be very aware of, but that means there's going to be the temptation to be aware of other things, right? This is that whole conversation, and I'm going to do a whole live on this, but because I think it's powerful and layered, but it's a very famous conversation, right, between Jesus and the devil, who is a metaphor for doubt, and Jesus is your imagination, right? So it's all psychological, but he has all these temptations. So what that means is that if awareness and attention are your currency, that means somebody else is going to want to take that as well. not even necessarily take it away from like some sort of like angry, like, violent way, but there are opportunities. There are opportunities for you every day to actually draw your awareness away, to draw your attention away, to give it all of away on things that you don't want, right? So, there's the news. There is maybe friends who don't believe in the law that want to make fun of you for believing in it. There are books. There are songs. There are. This is not, by the way, me saying be afraid of the world. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, both Joseph Murphy and Neville argue you should get to the point where you can ignore the triggers, not repress them, deal with them. But when you deal with them, the natural after effect of dealing with them is that you're going to ignore them because they're no longer part of your new state, the new body of beliefs that you've accepted is true, right? You're a different person, right? The old is gone and the new has come, right? Um, right now, and there's a song right now. There's actually two, but there's one by a guy named Fink, Fink, and it says looking too closely, and it's about somebody who isn't really taking responsibility, right? Because um you know it's where we're trying to protect ourselves, so we're not looking close enough, right? So we're always saying, oh my gosh, there's something outside of me, right? And so this has become almost to like a point of like not being a jerk towards myself or other people, but like to the point where I'm like, I don't allow victim thinking. Like I just don't. It's not even an option anymore. So it's like when I see something happening and I'm noticing it, I'm like, oh, so I'm the one who's noticing it. That's really what Neville is saying. Get to be fully aware that when you see something and it creates an emotional response, no one did that. No one. No one is emotionalizing or emotionally experiencing something for you, right? You are. So then that means, right, we have to take responsibility. There's another one, and this is the one I'm going to write the Reddit on. There's a song called Turn the Lights Down Low, right? And I'm going to go through it and use Neville's work. So, like, for example, and one day I'll actually do this. I actually finished a free Facebook 5-day challenge about a month ago on this very thing, and it was called Into the Silence. You could actually join the group on Facebook, and the group is just called Into the Silence. And so when the song, and it's by a guy named Max, um, and it's actually a love song, but I'm imagining the love song is between me and the inner self, right? And so, but part of what my breakdown is for example, when he says turn the lights down low, is the same thing as what Neville says is as going into the silence. And there's actually three levels of going into the silence, right? And so, and I'll share one or two right now. And the one like the most powerful one that I've combined it with psychology is because yes, he is saying go into the silence, as in yes, go and meditate, yes, go and create, go and be in the imagination. That's part one. Part two is when you combine it with the work of Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung or even Jacques Lacan, people I've mentioned before, like the kind of like fathers of psychoanalysis, right? Is how do I do this? So, and then I will end this conversation after that with a tip. But like I'm trying to just think of how to explain it in such a way where it won't be too confusing, because the way I got it is not like a hop, skip, and a jump. It's okay. This is probably an easier way. So in behavioral science, the field that I'm working in, there's what's called the intention gap, right? And so that means there's usually a behavior. So where we say, "Hey, I'm going to go do this," and then we don't end up doing it. All right. And so that's called the behavioral intention gap. Okay. And so that gap, though, is in one sense a form of darkness, a form of a void, a form of separation. Okay. And so, right. And so when you are trying to understand what he's saying, I'm always thinking of gaps as the gap that we create with the ego. So the ego is meant to bridge the gap between us feeling whole, complete and happy. Because up until the ages now, all right, well, I guess I'm just going to explain it. Okay, so I got 6 minutes. So, all right, so basically the gap is from the work of Jacques Lacan. Okay, and so he says that every single human, past, present, and future, will always go through what's called the mirror stage. Okay, And so the mirror stage is what babies do when they see themselves in the mirror. And the mirror doesn't have to be a physical, actual mirror. It could be anything reflective, right? But then they notice something. Oh, I'm no longer this defragmented person. Like, because when they're breastfeeding, they're just like, I'm arms and legs. They don't see their torso as much, right? They only notice their arms and their legs, and they only notice flailing, and their neck is flailing, and all this kind of stuff. But what they do feel is wholeness. So you can actually replace the mother, right, as a metaphor. This is what Jacques Lacan does as well, for a symbol of feeling whole and complete. Let me say it a different way. You can feel in the mother for you having your desire. Okay, so then that is the mother. Okay, the maternal metaphor in Jacques Lacan's work. Okay, but then he says there's a moment, there's a break, and this is where the ego comes from, and this is also where language comes from, right? And so he ultimately says that, like, when we're in this state, okay, that when once that moment, right, once that moment happens, when we look at ourselves in the mirror, there's a split. Then what happens is in that split, the ideal ego comes in, meaning the person that we think we need to be, okay, not just now, not 5 minutes from now, for the next 100 years, right? And so he is a very darker, he has a very, very darker understanding than Neville does, because he basically argues we could never be satisfied. Neville says we could always be satisfied, right? If we use our attention and all of these little tips and states akin to sleep and all this kind of stuff, right? But that that moment is the moment where the baby realizes, oh, I want to be what's reflecting back to me, right? I want to be that whole body, because up until that point, I thought I was whole because I was connected to the mother's breast, right? But now I realize and recognize that reflection, I can't reach it. So there's a gap. So I need to create an ideal ego that protects me from threats, that makes me or reminds me of that gap. So then, right? So are you with me so far? Because I know some people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, but for me, that gap, right? That gap is a void. That gap is a separation. That gap is an illusion. Okay. So for me, there's also what is called the like the moment of reaction, right? So what is that? Like Neville says in one of his lectures, the devil or Satan is your reaction, right? The reaction from the lack state. Okay. And so what this is to me, when he says go into the silence, he's saying go into the gap between who you've made up as a person who is just reacting off of the old story. So go into that gap. So there's like this is who you want to be, this is who you are now. There's a gap, right? So when he says go into the silence, go into the gap so that you don't just become this old version of yourself reacting to things outside of you, right? So then going in and going into the silence is I'm going into the gap to do the work to become the new person, right? To actually give up the old reactions, the old stories, the old limiting beliefs, the old fears, those things. Hence why when he says, listen, I dare you to assume, and I'm probably going to do another live on just dare to assume, because I think people hear that too much and they're like, oh, that's a cool bumper sticker. No, 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 no. There's a reason why he dares you. And he brings that up in several of his lectures. A dare is changing you, right? Because right now, before the dare, you're this person, right, who is afraid and da da da. No, no, no. I dare you. And assumption is a triple layered thing as well. I'm not going to go into it now, but like, you know, I dare you to assume. Okay. So that means everything that you have accepted is true. Everything that you've been borrowing from your parents and from society and from church groups and from the Bible or from Christianity or from Islam or whatever it is, everything you've been borrowing is over here. You got to give that up. And I dare you. I dare you. That means to leave it and then go and be this new person. And that's what he's also meaning about experiencing nature. You're always having to dare yourself. This is why I said at the beginning of this chat today. You need courage. And what's really cool is Andrew Huberman, a guy I follow who's a Stanford neuroscientist. He actually did an actual research project. His whole lab did, and they found out that courage is a switch, right, in your brain that you can turn on. Like you don't have to go earn courage. You don't have to go and do 5 things and then courage. You have to turn it on. But to turn it on, you have to overcome something, right? And so when you do that, right, is that you ultimately, okay, you ultimately have to give up the old story. But to give up the old story, you have to push through and go through the other story. So even if you want to do something big in life, you have to start doing that now. You don't start tomorrow. You don't start 5 minutes from now. Everything is always now, right? Yeah, yeah, exactly, X. Yeah, because I don't believe in extroversion or introversion. Even though I might use those terms, that's because they're pop culture. There's actually proof that extroversion and introversion don't exist in terms of one person's extroverted and the other person's introverted, right? It's just on a spectrum, right? So meaning it depends on who you are and where you're at and who you're hanging with and what and how you feel about the environment and all of these kinds of things. So there's a loads of contributing elements, right? And so again, I know that we went through a lot today, but use the circle of excellence. That's that technique that I was teaching you, right? To give you confidence. Do this every day. This isn't when I give you these techniques, these are not one and done, right? These are building up. And then you can use the anchor, whether it's like I'm like doors, walking through doors freak me out. Well, then imagine that you walk through a door with courage and then you anchor it by putting your fingers together, right? And pinching that. And then every time you have to walk through a door, boom, courage comes. Again, it takes about 2 weeks for this to hardwire into who you are. So whatever you are holding back on, start embodying it. Create that nature. Write down 10 to 15 things of what this new nature would look like. Who would this person be? What actions would they take? And I know that you hear me say some of this right every day because that is what this is about. The daily repetitive, right, building of your new nature. And that is what it is. But make it fun. I mean, guys, gals, like non-binaries, like we're here, right? So why not have fun with it? Make it creative, use colored pencils, right? Whatever it is for you, right? Um, Not pinching, but like pressing, right? So like not taking your nail and like this, but just putting pressure on it. You know what I mean? And you only anchor after you get that emotion. And you could use this for manifestation as well. And it's actually helped me and amplified. And there are more techniques. And I didn't go into everything today. I was going to go into what are called set point memories. It's a technique that I teach um, my clients, and it's all backed by neuroscience. It's pretty crazy, but find out more about that by joining the group, or I might teach it tomorrow, or something like that, right? Um, yes, you know what? Actually, I think you actually said something as well, X, about having something as well um, in the Discord group. So, you know what? I probably will sit down for it because I mean, it'd be super cool to actually give out these techniques. So, yeah, you've actually given me some inspiration for that. So, thank you for that. But yeah, keep going. I'll most likely be on tomorrow. So, be here if you can, 10 to 12 ish my time. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for being amazing. Thank you for being who you are and live well. Give up your limiting beliefs. Live the best life that you can, right? Yeah, so the better if you touch your fingers. So yeah, so that is one of the things that they argue in NLP. Like this is probably the most or the best one. But if you're trying to and you can't and it doesn't connect with you, you can use objects. You can use music. You can use songs. You can use words, like almost like self hypnosis. So you're trying to actually be like, okay, every time, right? Every time that you hear a word, then it triggers you into courage, right? And if you're looking for ways to do that, or if you want to do that in real time with me, then book an hour with me or book a package and I can actually walk you through this, right? Yeah. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being supportive and much love to you all. Have a beautiful day manifesting whatever it is that you're seeking. And it's also seeking you as well. So much love, everybody. Enjoy your day. You too.